Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our EDGE webinar today. Today we have a very interesting and I think a long overdue topic for conversation within the design and construction industry. It is something that is quite close to all of us who have worked in the construction industry and have seen our colleagues face some of the challenges that are there. And Dr. Thomas today is going to provide like an overview for us and really trying to reinforce and reduce some of the stigma around mental health. And for us as quality professionals, sometimes we're often on sort of the edge of most of the activities and things that we see in construction. And there is a role I think that we can play not only in identifying and working with our colleagues in other functions and disciplines, but also I think, being leaders out there that can actually help to change the state in the industry. So Dr. Thomas today is a seasoned expert in project management and performance technology. And I think that we're very lucky to have him here today to do this presentation. His background includes over 2 decades of work in human resources and training across the life sciences sector. And he's been mainly active within the pharmaceutical industry, as well as doing some research in both the medical and pharmaceutical side. He is also known as a business strategist. He is an adjunct professor and a guest speaker who has presented at many different forums, both in the US and internationally as well. And I think that something that's quite good as well is his expertise is quite wide. So he brings a very broad expertise into seeing mental health and also how it contributes to performance and resilience as well, across both project management, quality and compliance, human resources development, learning development, and recently in information technology. He is also very passionate about project evaluation. And if you are very interested in project and performance evaluation, I would point you to his website, which is www.lessonslearned.info. And so that's one word, lessonslearned.info. And he also has a doctorate in evaluation, which I think very much sort of, gave birth to the website, which I think is a fantastic resource, Dr. Thomas. I think it's really excellent. I've had a look at it. So that said, we have quite a few people already, so we're ready to start. Before I hand over to Dr. Thomas, just one thing in terms of the admin. As we go through the different sections, Dr. Thomas will pause and ask if there's any questions. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and I will feed those questions to Dr. Thomas. If you're very quiet, you can save your questions for the end and we'll go through those. So, okay, so without further ado, Dr. Thomas, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Hassan, and thank you very much for the time that you're investing today. We appreciate your 1-hour investment in a very important topic that we're going to be talking about well-being, right, in the design and construction industry. And so I'm going to be speaking with you today, representing the American Society for Quality through the lens of human resources. So as the HR business professional and partner for our company here in the United States, I'm responsible for managing resources, talent acquisition, and making sure that the business flow is smooth in many respects. So I deal with many very interesting scenarios, when people either call me or I get contacted. And I've had some very interesting situations recently that I've had to address, and I will share with you appropriately what some of the challenges were to help you to have a further appreciation that this topic is one that is so important, considering, many of the things that are happening. We see now that maybe more than ever before that people are experiencing monumental change. We see this, on the news. It's not only in politics, it's in the environment, it's in the changes in the industry, it's in the growth of new sectors, the implementation of AI, and many things that are really affecting the capacity of individuals to be effective, as they deal with challenges, right? So we have to realize that this particular topic, no one is immune from it if you're human, right? We all have to address the issue of mental health and wellness and our well-being. So we want to think about resilience, our ability to adapt. I became, certified, on this topic back in more than 20 years ago. I had the opportunity to meet with some major practitioners in the area of change management and dealing with health and wellness, and became certified because I really wanted to understand, just from a practitioner standpoint in human resources, not trying to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but more of the human dynamics between supporting people. And so what we're going to be talking about today in our discussion is looking at mental health in the design and construction industry. Physical well-being is a very important component of that. We're going to look at its role in mental health. We're also going to talk about social well-being. So building supportive work environments. What does that look like? Mental and emotional well-being. And we're going to talk about fostering resilience. And then we're going to be looking at some coping strategies and a new topic that many people are hearing about, which we call mindfulness. So as we think about this, and, I have been engaged in some construction related projects, for some federal government projects over the past year, where I've had the opportunity to really see some very big scale projects and some of the complexities that go into this, and the workers, right? The sweat dripping off of their brows, the stress that they bring into the job, the stress that they leave from the job. And speaking to these individuals and really understanding, the paramount importance of this particular topic. So as we think about mental health, it really begins with us, right? So sometimes we might hear things on the news and we say, how could this possibly happen? How could this road rage possibly happen? How could this incident in the inner city possibly happen? And then we look at the family in which we are a part of, which is the design and construction industry, and we hear about incidents there. So, I was at the baseball game. I'm a Brewers fan because I'm from Wisconsin. They've had a great week. And I was speaking with my sister, and my sister has both a PhD and a law degree. And as we were sitting there in the stand, she says, as you look up and as you think about what happened in terms of design and construction, there were 6 people that were killed. And this was when they were building the Brewers Stadium. As you may know, that the stadium has the ability to close. And it ended up being a $600 million lawsuit, right? You think about the impact of the families. You think about the impact to the city as the whole. Even though it is a tremendous stadium, and even though it was a game, when you look up and you have that remembrance of what it took to put together the stadium and the impact that it had from a mental health perspective, and that still lingers to this day, right? So there's still, amidst the joy that you experience in a winning game, there is still that thought of what it took to put together that stadium, and what component of that, or what part of that, even though things were mechanical, could anything have been prevented if somebody was thinking a little bit clearer? Could any of those events have prevented that accident from happening? That becomes the question. So a couple events which have been monumental, right? Most recently are the national safety stand downs to prevent falls. And this was just a couple months ago, right, in the month of May. And we have another construction suicide prevention stand down, which is happening next month. And I would welcome each person to please pause and take a moment to attend this event. You can see that it's going to happen from 1:50 p.m. Central to 2:50 p.m. Eastern. And the request here is for a moment of silence. This is a reflective moment, because those who are in design and construction, perhaps second to those who are in the military, on a daily basis, some of these people are risking their lives, and they are investing tremendous effort to bring new facilities, new buildings, new roads, and all of the things that we take for granted on a daily basis. So it's important that we just stop for a moment and we recognize the importance of this. This presentation is not meant to be about statistics, but if you were to do your research, you will find that it is claimed that those who are in this industry experience a significantly higher suicide rate than other people for a number of different reasons. And so for those that are in a management capacity, it's important that we talk about things such as how to address tight deadline pressure in high risk work environments. These people are working under very tight deadlines. You can think of yourself when you're driving on the highway and you see construction and you see safety cones, and you're thinking, man, when is this going to be done? It's very easy for us to get impatient when we're waiting in line, and yet you have construction workers that are working and you see people going 65 and 70 miles an hour, and these people are trying to work. There are complex project challenges. So managing complex projects demands extensive problem solving and decision making skills. This contributes to a significant amount of stress. So when we think about the industry and what the contribution is of those in design and construction, it is a good idea, again, for us to take a moment next month, pause, and join this important event. And so there are many people that we could talk about today. We could talk about leaders, we could talk about workers. I've got the focus on those who have touch points. Again, from an HR perspective, when we look at the role of managers set the tone for mental health and awareness and influence in the workplace. Influencing this positively is very, very important, because you don't know what the mindset is of an individual who may have been hurt on the workplace yesterday. Things happen, right, in design and construction. People can hit themselves with a hammer on the hand. They can bump something with their foot, and this can cause ongoing injury and soreness. It's also important for us to have early issue identification. So informed managers can recognize mental health issues early and provide timely support. So if we notice that someone is irritated or more irritable than usual, it's important for us to take a moment, stop, and see what we can do to be supportive. Sometimes the supportive words are very important. Even when you're us as individuals, you're at the grocery store. What I've learned is it's important to roll your cart slower. So when I'm in the grocery store, I will look around, and before I get to the register, and I will see if somebody is in front or behind me that has less groceries. And if there's somebody that I see that's in a working field, I will pause and I will move slower, because I understand that person probably had a hard day. And I'll say, I'm going to let this person go first, because this is one thing that I can do, because they've had a long day. And so we have to do what we can do to promote well-being. Managers should encourage practices that promote mental well-being within their teams. Is there something that we can do during our OSHA toolbox talks, which I've conducted frequently, to encourage people and to let them know that they are appreciated for the work that they're doing? And the reason that we're having the toolbox talk is because we value their contribution as team members. And I will look them in the eye and say, thank you for the excellent work that you're doing. You have a skill, you have a talent, you have an ability that I do not have. And without you, this work could not be completed. This will make all the difference in the way that that individual feels during the day. I've done other things such as bring cookies or making sure that I have adequate water and saying, hey, this one is for you. Let's take a break. I understand that that particular installation component did not go as desired. Let's revisit and see what we can do, right? And always giving that reinforcement. And it's surprising. It's absolutely wonderful when people come back and saying, thank you for caring. So there are some common misconceptions about mental health in the workplace. I recently had a conversation with somebody who is very well educated. They're not only an engineer, they're a lawyer. They contacted me and they said, I want to give you, Willis, an apology on my behalf. And it says, you understand what my background is. I consider myself to be a highly educated individual. But on this particular project, I forgot to take my medicine. And my wife has always reminded me that if I don't take my medicine, I don't respond to people in the workplace. And I actually yelled at somebody today and I am humiliated. I can't even find words, to describe it. And so I contacted, the different people and I said, hey, there was a situation, this is, it's private, but I will want to express to you that this will not happen again. And the people said, thank you for reaching out. So it is not abnormal, right? I'm going to use the term abnormal because we are human to have spikes in our personality or our behavior. And we classify this as part of mental health, right? So these are things that may not repeat themselves, but these are things that have happened. And in the workplace, it's critically important that we address it. If I did not address that issue, then people may have thought that this is his normal behavior, which it is not, right? It was something that his medication that is critical for his psychological functioning was forgotten, and it caused an interruption in the workplace. Fortunately, I was able to resolve it fully. So that's why I say it is a myth that mental health is a weakness. Okay, so again, I want to let everybody know that mental health is not a weakness. I received a call just this week from a very successful chief financial officer, and she said, hey, Willis, I'm just calling to talk for a moment with you. She says, I have to step down from my current role because my son is going through his second brain tumor. And I said, okay, let's take a moment and let's talk about this. And I was able to reinforce with her that this is a good decision. It's nice to make a lot of money. We all want to make a lot of money. But I'm going to tell you something, that your children are a whole lot more important than a whole lot of money. Life is short. And it's important that we prioritize things such as family first and the health and well-being of our children and our ability to cope. And she was having problems coping. So I said, okay, here's, let's get together for lunch. Let's talk about this. Let's pray about this, see what we can do here. So again, think about this, that it is not a weakness. So if you feel at any time, that you're experiencing this, don't not consider yourself to be weak. Or if you see other people that are experiencing these challenges, it's not that they're weak. Ignoring mental health issues can worsen conditions. Some people just want to say, well, that incident that I had with road rage, it's not a big deal. It just happens. I get mad. I curse at people when they cut in front of me on a highway. Anytime someone does, that could be a buildup of stress, and it should be noted. Why are you feeling that way? Is there something that you can do to mitigate it? Can you slow down your driving? Can you provide more space for people? I've become very conscious about where and how I park. Okay, I give people more than adequate room. Sometimes if it's extra crowded, I will park a little bit further away. I understand that, people are getting on certain days and times, I don't go to the grocery store because people are going to be higher stress. It's at the end of the day, they want to get in and get out. It's very different depending upon what times you shop at the grocery store, right? And then creating supportive environments. It's important for us to address misconceptions, foster understanding, support, and healthier work environment. And I stress this very strongly because I've had to deal with situations of a hostile work environment. What do I mean by hostile? Someone speaking to you in an improper tone that is not respectful. That's where hostility starts in the workplace. And this must be addressed immediately, directly, and respectfully. And so I stop and I talk to people, and many times the root cause is that the person is experiencing stress themselves. So I'll begin by saying, how are you feeling? Are you getting enough rest and relaxation? And the person says, nope, absolutely not. I'm working long hours. I'm really stressed. And I say, you know what? I noticed that your behavior is normally calm, but I've noticed some differences. Is there anything that I can do to be helpful? Or is there a stress? Is there some documentation you're working on? What is it that I can do to be helpful? And then normally that comes like, man, this is last week was really, really bad. Okay, I says, okay, so what happened? And so this is the way that you can check in with people and really ask them the question, right? What is it that you can do to be helpful? And so here, there's a statement by Zach Braff that I like. It says, I'm by no means condemning prescription medicine for mental health. I've seen it to save a lot of people's lives. And what I'm saying is that I'm not here to represent myself as a medical doctor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but I do firmly believe that those who take high blood pressure medicine, there's nothing wrong with that. If this is prescribed by your physician or any other thing that helps with your blood pressure is one of those critical things that we have to keep in check. And this is not discounting the fact that you might have a fabulous diet, right, that is designed to control and account for certain physical things that you may be experiencing. But being in the pharmaceutical industry for the past 20 years, there are many things that just work and are designed to work and work well. They've been scientifically proven to work well. And blood pressure medicines is one of those things that, even though our diet may be marvelous at helping us control the blood pressure medicine, do not feel embarrassed if you have to take it. I personally take high blood pressure medicine to make sure that my blood pressure stays in check. So the impact of physical health on mental wellness, right? It's important that we have some physical activity in our life. I mean, you've seen these overwhelming number of ads you probably get about chair exercises. So they say if you can't get out of the house, try to do a chair exercise. Sit in your chair, move your legs, move your arms, because they are intended to really help you to get your blood flowing and to reduce stress. Fatigue and mental health. Fatigue negatively impacts mental health by increasing stress and reducing emotional resilience. So you have to be very careful of fatigue. I've seen people to stay on the computer for more than 8 hours in a day without getting up. This creates fatigue. You deserve it to have an opportunity to get up and stretch and reduce fatigue. So pay particular attention that if you're sitting at the computer for too long or doing any kind of activity repetitively for too long, to give your body and your mind a chance to take a break. Poor diet can worsen mental health symptoms. Now, I will openly admit that I love potato chips. Potato chips are not good for high blood pressure. So I have to really be conscious of making sure that I'm not eating too many salty foods because I really like salty foods. And we have to keep a check on what it is that we're eating during the day, especially when we find that it's impacting our thinking or our responsiveness and our behaviors. And certain foods that I've noticed will do that. So when we talk about poor diet, we're talking about an imbalanced diet, and the culprit becomes junk food. So this is a checkpoint, especially in the workplace. Take a look at how much junk food people are eating, and is that having any impact on their behaviors, right? That's the key point. And there are many benefits of exercise, whether it's a casual walk. Sometimes I'll just be at the office and I'll say, hey, I'd like to talk to you. Let's go for a walk. If it's a nice day, we go outside. Let's go for a walk. And I notice that people's response when they're talking to you when they're walking is very different than if you're sitting in an office, especially if you're talking about some particular issues. It gives their mind a chance to free, it gives them the chance to recalibrate. And when I look at Azandra's, comment that I pulled down for this presentation, she states that the reality is that living with myositis is extremely hard on someone's health. It's overwhelming, it's draining, it's exhausting, infuriating, and anxiety inducing. So, I keep a check on, when people share with me, they have certain challenges, and, I don't share with anybody else, but a lot of people will say, hey, I'm a diabetic. I says, okay, you're a diabetic. And so then I will keep that in mind as I go out to eat. And I'll say, hey, you want to go to lunch? And I'll make a conscious check on what it is that they should be eating. And sometimes I'll say, hey, there's this particular thing on the menu. My treat today, you want to go out someplace else. Or if you start to notice that they have an energy drop, it's terrible for diabetics. Absolutely terrible. So keep a couple candy bars or something in your desk, because that might make the difference for them being able to continue the day if they do not have that instant sugar to react to a potential episode. So you have to understand the environment in which you are working, and when people share with you, I'm not intrusive, but I take note of saying, okay, this person has this kind of health situation, that person has that kind of health situation, and this is the way that it could potentially affect the company and the team environment. I'm very conscious about those factors. So there are some strategies for maintaining physical health in demanding roles. Again, regular exercise, even though it might be small, routines that you do, balanced nutrition, and adequate rest. Now, the whole dynamics behind rest is going to be different for individuals, right? Some people find 5 hours of sleep enough. Other people have to get the full 8. It depends upon the individual. But what I, recommend doing is really taking a very close analysis on the amount of rest you're getting and how you are resting. It may be a good time for you to look at that new pillow. It may be worth you investing in a reclining chair. We have reclining chairs, we have reclining beds at home, because we recognize the importance of getting a really good night's sleep. It could be changing your linen, right, in your bed, because you might sleep better with certain type of linen that sleeps cooler. But the whole study around your sleep, right, in your rest is critically important to how your mental health feels. And it's important that we recognize the physical signs of mental health issues. So headaches, sleep disturbances, unexplained aches, do not let these things go as, oh, I'm just feeling that way today, but really try to take a moment and pause and saying, why do I continue to get headaches? Why do I continue to wake up at night? Why do I continue to get aches and pains in this area? And what I recommend is taking a note of the date and time. And when you meet with your physician, give them as much detail as you can by saying, it only happens in the morning, or it only happens at the end of the day, or it only happens in the middle of the day when it's hot and humid. So then when they start to diagnose how they can help you, they have more data to work with. A lot of times, if you don't write it down when you experience these things, then what happens is we forget, and we saying, you forget about it, and you get with your physician and they're saying, oh, well, tell me when, and you can't remember, right? So as Einstein well said, he doesn't try to remember the things he can write down. So it's a good practice. Keep a journal of these things so that they can be resolved. And there is an importance of awareness, recognizing these symptoms early, right? Not later. What I am kindly suggesting is that we want to recognize them early to support better health outcomes for our mental health. So next we're going to talk about social well-being. Now, I've had the opportunity to talk to people, and I conducted a mental health webinar last year and this was to a very different audience, right? This was actually to people that were having problems with domestic disturbance. So these were people that were incarcerated. I mean, really bad family problem kind of situations. And as part of their rehabilitation, they were required to get certain training, including the training that I was delivering on mental health. So again, I came to the audience, they like the fact that, I'm an HR professional with a master's in HR and I've been doing it. And they said, well, we understand you're not a medical doctor, but we would like to, get your perspective on mental health. I said, well, I delivered this one before, so I will deliver it again. And there was some real interesting observations that came out of that presentation because they had lots of questions in the back. And so I gave them some tools, which I'm going to give you at the end of the presentation, of what they can do. And really, these things are just designed to help us recalibrate, right? These tools are just designed to help us get a grip on things, right? So if you're in a high stress situation or you feel that you're about to blow up or something else or something has caught you by surprise, and these things can happen all the time, right? A death of a loved one will do it to you, right? You're in the middle of your day, you get a phone call and there's a death of a loved one, or some other catastrophic event, and some people just can't regroup. It takes them a lot, right? So some of these things I'm going to show you are helping you to, help other people when they get that catastrophic phone call. Their child has been in a car accident and they can't come to grips with this, right? And they reach out to you, and you got to do more than saying it's going to be okay. You have to have certain tools to help people because these things are going to happen to all of us. Nobody is immune from this. Sooner or later, if you haven't experienced these events, it is going to happen to all of us, and we all have to be prepared. So when I talk about teamwork and interpersonal connections, what I'm talking about is being real, okay? I'm talking about being genuinely real. And, I get very real with people and really understand the real person, right? So what is the real person and how can I connect to the real person? Away from the game face, away from people trying to be political, but what's the real person? And what is it that I can do to be supportive? That's the only way I have found of being in corporate America for 40 years to develop relationships. You have to get to the real person and you have to let them see genuinely what is you. I've been married 35 years next month. I've raised kids, I've got grandkids, so I've lived a while. It's important for us to enhance morale. It is amazing. I'll tell you about a story when I was in California. I was in California for a federal government project, designing construction, and I was at the restaurant, and there was a guy, obviously special needs or something, that was sweeping the floor. I started clapping, and I says, I would like to see the manager. The manager comes out and says, sir, why are you clapping? I want to recognize this guy right here who's sweeping these floors in front of your entire staff because he swept everything, and I cannot see any crumbs on the floor. Trust me, I know what good sweeping is, and this guy is a sweeping master. She came back out later and she said, sir, I have never in my entire life seen somebody shine like what he's shining in my entire life. And you could feel the tears, her inner tears. You could feel her inner tears from a simple comment about somebody who feels worthless about their job and being able to connect with that person. Talking about designing construction, I went to Home Depot. I had a conversation with the person at the register, and I let them know how appreciating I am of their job and what they're doing. This woman shook her head at me and said, sir, I have never had this experience, and I'm going to give you a secret today that you never knew. She said, you see that fountain over there against the wall? And I said, yeah, I see that fountain. She says, I want you to take it and put it in your cart and take it home. I said, what are you talking about? That would be stealing. She said, no, Home Depot, we have products that are last in the SKU that we decide not to sell. And we decide who we're going to give them to. Nobody knows this. She said, today you are that person. And so I've learned the importance of people that are doing the lowly jobs. It is important to enhance their morale, because if you don't, who's going to do it? We cannot leave it to someone else and expect that they're going to enhance the morale. In the criticality of design and construction, your morale boosting may be the difference to that person's life sustainability. It's also important that we reduce stress. So strong connections among team members help to reduce stress. I always try to figure out something funny to talk about in the news or something good to bring to the team and help people to laugh. I am naturally a person who's able to make people laugh. So I will do things like bring donuts in and I will share them with people and figure out how to make people laugh. It's important as the stress reducer. It is known scientifically that if you can help people laugh, it does a lot to the body to relieve stress. So figure out how to bring joy and laughter into your team. It is amazing what it will do. Fostering belonging. A sense of belonging is built through collaboration. Now, my technique is when I go to a lot of the guys, and I'll say guys, sometimes I do it with ladies, but more or less, sometimes I'll refer to my team members as brother. Say, hey, brother, you know, this is a great thing today that we've done here. Client is happy. I'll use that term. And people are very comfortable with me using that term because I think of us as family, right? Encouraging teamwork enhances social well-being and drives collective success. So if your team is feeling better, if they're feeling less stress, if they're feeling a better sense of mental well-being, they're going to perform better. A lot of companies are talking about improving productivity. I've got a client that contacted me this week. They said, hey, we'd like to have you come in for just 2 days and help us with dealing with team dynamics, right? And, you know, the bigger picture is how do people think and how do people feel? No one is immune from this. I don't care if you're the CEO of the company or if you're the janitor. Everybody is going to have some level of stress within an organization. So it's important that we create an inclusive and supportive culture. A lot of people want to talk about company culture, but one of the main values that a company should have is well-being of its employees. How do they feel? Do people smile when they come into the workplace, and are they smiling when they're going home? Are they looking forward to coming into the next day, right? It's important that we respect diversity in its true terms. The people with different backgrounds, you know, I'm going to be feeling different and thinking different than you. One of the ways that I embrace diversity is through the foods that I eat, right? So if it's Indian food, if it's Mexican food, whatever, I'll embrace it. I'll try it. I'll go to that restaurant with you. You know, I will experience it. Sometimes the food is a little bit hotter than I can eat, but I do the best that I can. When I've traveled internationally, I traveled to China last year, and I taught AI project management to graduate level students, some of the smartest and most powerful people at that level in China. They asked me to come, special invitation. And I tried everything except for the silkworms, except for the silkworms. I was able to eat everything. And so they were like, wow, you're really a true trooper here. I said, yep, I'm a true trooper from the United States. And so again, creating that inclusive and supportive culture. Psychological safety. People feel that they can express their true selves and that they can be safe. This is so important to being able to deal with challenging situations, especially in mental health, that they can say something to you, right? And as you can imagine, I get calls on everything. Anything that you can imagine, I've received calls on. And so I let people know, yeah, what you're saying to me stays with me. What you're sharing with me stays with me. You know, what is on your mind? What is the challenge? And I will hear all kinds of things. Um, there are many mental health business benefits to mental health. A supportive culture, again, impacts mental health. So, we don't want to send people to EAP the first sign of a challenge with a personal issue, financial issue, social issue, emotional issue. EAP should not be their first stop. The first stop has to be with management, in my opinion, where we can deal with things if we're compliant with it. We should have the skills, or we should find people with the skills that can do this to create a supportive work environment. So when you think about stigma and promoting open conversations, it's important that we reduce the stigma that makes employees more comfortable discussing mental health. We should have open forums with this. You find people are getting angry, you find people are getting upset, you find people are challenging. Someone might be having a baby at work. I had a recent situation, and this was at Lowe's, another design and construction project. I walked in, I noticed a woman was pregnant. And so something told me, it says, go up and tell the woman, my wife, she has this collection of reborn dolls. She loves to be a doll collector. And we had a full size crib. So someone says, go and, talk to this woman, let her know that you have a crib that you no longer need. So I walk up and says, ma'am, I'm hoping I won't be too personal, but something is telling me to talk to you about, would you like to have a free crib? And the woman started crying. And I said, okay, I'm sorry. And she said, no, sir, your timing is so perfect because one of the women here, her family refused to give her anything for her baby shower. And you could not know how awesome what you just said was. And I brought the crib back, and the store manager was there applauding. He said, sir, I cannot believe that you knew this. We've got 5 women here that are pregnant. And these women are short on things. They just do not have because they don't have. I says, okay, so that's, well, here's something else that might have, we're happy to help in any way that we can. I got to the register, and I was buying a new water heater. And they said, sir, can we give you a 20% discount on this? Which amounted to $150 off of your, and I says, that's very kind of you to do that. So you never know, right? You just never know. So when we talk about a manager and a leadership role in these kinds of experiences, it's really important that we are aware of the environments, that we're in. We're still coming out of this, what I would call pandemic era where people have become isolated. And I've discussed isolation that can be just a terrible, terrible thing for some people, emotionally, psychologically. It is not healthy not to have natural relationships with people. And I say, some people think that social withdrawal is okay. And I tell people it's not okay. You need people, and people need you. Other people might need you more than you need them, but we need each other because that is the way that we were created. We were not created to be isolated and sitting in the house and scared to touch a door and all of these other things. So it's important for us to recognize the common signs of isolation and social withdrawal, and invite people to things. And then also, it's important that we help them with any things that could be an intervention. And I look at intervention as such as, hey, you know what, there's a baseball game. I got an extra ticket. Would you like to go? I understand that you've not been out for lunch in a while. Hey, let's go out for lunch, right? So having a barometer on these things is very, very important. So this is a model that I created. I talk about the role of AI in mental health. And there's different things that I think that AI can do to be supportive. I use AI personally for mindfulness. So there are, I talk to some of the most brilliant minds on the planet that are involved in VR technology. So Zuckerberg, MetaQuest, about things that they're creating, and some of the backstories of some of the developers is actually absolutely amazing. Of some of the top VR developers in the world who I've had the opportunity to speak with. And so I've done beta testing for them in this area of mental health and wellness, right? And they say, hey, I'm coming out with a new one. Dr. Thomas, we would like to have you test this and give us your impression on what it is and how it works, right? And very, very cool stuff in the backstories. Like I say, one of the developers that's one of the top in the world said, this reminds me of my mom, and I created this in memory of her to pull on people's heartstrings. And he says, as you get into here, now you'll understand why I created it in the way that I created it was for a way to unlock your thinking, right? So VR is a very powerful tool for stress management and emotional regulation in the area of mindfulness. Time management is important, so effective time management is key. Social support, seeking social support provides emotional relief. Counseling, there's nothing wrong with getting professional counseling if you're getting it from a good counselor. Some of them are great. And then, of course, as I've mentioned, AI tools and techniques are very helpful if you have the right applications. And so the key here is never feel embarrassed to reach out to the right resources. Be aware of instantaneous changes in the environment. I look at things such as floods. Floods have been hitting Wisconsin. A lot of people have been impacted. A lot of times when I have conversations with people, I just had a business conversation with someone in North Carolina, and the first things out of my mouth are, hey, my prayers and my thoughts continue to go out to those in North Carolina. I wish the best for you. And that set the whole tone for the conversation, right? Because people in areas that have been devastated by things such as hurricanes and floods will have long-term effects on mental health. And so it's important that we reinforce them with positive comments. And it's essential that we maintain an active gauge, right? So how are you feeling today? Are you feeling sad? Do you have anxiety? Are you feeling hopelessness? Are you overthinking things? Are you eating a bunch of junk food? Are you not sleeping well? Are you moody? Are you just losing interest in things? So you have to have a system such as this and a way to gauge yourself regarding your mental health. And there are different resources that are available. There's EAP programs, there's workshops, there's counseling, and of course, there's life coaching. My wife actually works with families in foster care that are also going through adoption, and she has some stories that I can't even state. The things that she deals with in the foster care system. I mean, the worst of the worst things that you could possibly imagine that you hear on the news. She deals with those call after call, right? So somebody's been killed. Somebody's killed somebody. This child just died, right? I mean, all of these kinds of situations, and she has to constantly coach people, to help people keep going, because a lot of times people are just become totally hopeless and don't know what to do, right? So that's her area of expertise. So some of the coping strategies that I want to talk to you about as we kind of wind down here is that mindfulness, the focus is on the present while removing negativity, right? Or promoting positivity. And sometimes, I always like to accentuate the positive, but sometimes it's about making sure that we get away from the negativity, right? So, we're all going to experience these periods of where you get hit by a bill that you weren't expecting. I just got hit by a bill that I had to pay for well abandonment. Now, I says, well, I've got a well on the property, but it's never been used. I've lived in the house 5 years, and the city came to me and say, well, you got to fill it. And I said, okay, so I've got to have somebody come out here and fill something that I've never used. It's not working. I said, yeah, because we want to have it, environmentally. I said, well, how much is this going to cost? And I was like, talk to my wife about it. I says, wow, we didn't plan for that this month. So, again, I had to regroup, right? I had to really think about, okay, this is what's being required. So even though we weren't expecting this, we still have to have a positive attitude. We can't let this send us down the negative road of thought, right? So, there's some core elements of mindfulness, which are awareness, acceptance, presence, and non-judgment. And then there's some common mindfulness techniques such as mindful breathing, body scan, mindful walking, and observing thoughts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through so that you're able to facilitate with yourself or someone else. Again, this is about mental health and me, but you may find someone that is just in a situation you're like, man, how do I deal with this? So, reflect on what Lillian Chamberlain said, that there's a breaking stigma around mental health. That means being open to seeking help for myself. It also means supporting others who struggle with mental health. So the breathing exercise is something that's scientifically proven to work, right? This is a big thing in VR, and people that do yoga and meditation actually get this, or maybe some of you who've not experienced this and know. So I'm going to walk you through it. If you find it valuable, great. If you question after, that's fine as well. But let me show you how it works, and then you can decide for yourself if you're comfortable using it. Okay, so here's how the technique goes. So we're going to start by gently closing our eyes. You're going to gently close your eyes. You're going to let your shoulders drop. You're going to loosen your jaw. And then you want to feel the weight of your body supported by the ground or chair. Next, you're going to take a slow, deep breath through your nose. Slow, deep breath through your nose. You're going to hold it for about 5 seconds. And now you're going to exhale gently through your mouth. So let your breath flow naturally. You just want to notice your breath. Now, if you're doing this in VR, you'd actually see the visuals of your breath coming in and out. Please repeat this process. And then as you breathe, bring your focus to the sensation of air entering and leaving your body. Feel your chest rise and fall. Notice the coolness of the inhale, the warmth of the exhale. Again, repeat this process. If your mind falters, sometimes it will, that's all right. But gently bring your breath back to yourself, returning to like your home base. Each breath is a fresh start. So as you do this, inhaling and exhaling with a slight 5-second, and there's different ways that we refer to this as the box exercise, that the breathing is a way to calm and lower the blood pressure. So you get a call that you've heard about a car accident, and man, your first intention is to jump on the phone, and you feel like you are about to go absolutely ballistic. Sometimes you just have to say, okay, let me give myself 2 minutes. And then make that call. Because otherwise, what could happen is you raise your blood pressure, which happens, and now you're in a panic situation, and now people got to worry about you, right? So then the next exercise is called the body scan. So you find a quiet space. Again, it could be in your chair. You're going to take a few slow, deep breaths using what I just showed you, that box exercise. You're going to bring awareness to your head. You're going to notice your forehead. You're going to notice if it's tensed or relaxed, and you're going to notice your eyes, your cheeks, your jaw, and you're going to let everything soften. And you have to practice this a number of times, but the key is to soften from your forehead all the way down to your toes, all the way down. And it's called the body scan technique, and it's designed to actually reduce the stress through your entire body. So those, again, who practice yoga, who practice meditation will get these. These are things that are in the safe space that you can do without a yoga mat, right? Or without a facilitator. They're safe, right? Regardless of what your belief system is, etc. This is something that we do across beliefs. These are very safe meditation exercises. It's not going to put your mind somewhere where it doesn't need to be, right? These are just practical things to reduce and to manage stress. So in conclusion, again, beginning on time and ending on time, we want to call your attention to what's going on September 8th. There are some links that are here. I'm going to ask Hassan to send those out so that you have reference to this as part of the presentation delivered today. On behalf of myself and ASQ Design and Construction Division, we'd like to thank you very much for attending the webinar today. And we hope that what we've shared with you will be of value. And again, we appreciate all of the wonderful contributions that you're making to mental health and well-being. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thomas. That was excellent. That was really good. I particularly like the practical advice, which I think people often miss, which is, just taking a little walk at lunchtime, provides a space in the day, to break the morning, and the afternoon, and gives you a chance to just relax, let some of the stress from the morning break out, as well as getting hopefully some fresh air when it's not too hot outside. And I think the other thing as well is that, sometimes being self-aware is also a way to start to notice when you maybe will start to feel a bit stressed because you feel a bit of tension. And I think that's where taking the 1 to 2 minute breathing exercise is a really good way to sort of just to check in with yourself as well. So I think that's fantastic. Okay, so I don't know if anyone has any comments. We did have a comment from Javier earlier on to say that his heart goes out to construction workers here in Phoenix who are working at 110 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer, and that then brings in the discussion really about heat stress as well, and that impact as well for people. And there are practical things, actually, I think that sometimes people don't realize. There's a saying in the UK that only mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the noonday sun, and in other countries where I've worked in, where it is 120 plus, what you do is you change your work schedule around, so you actually start working maybe 4 o'clock in the morning, so you finish the majority of the work before the heat starts and before the heat kicks in. And sometimes you do night shifts and things like that. So there are lots of different things that can be done, and I think it's recognizing that there is an issue and then doing something about it practically as well. So let me just have a quick scan through. Dan Holman made a nice comment as well. He said, one simple thing I do is when I say good morning to someone, I maintain eye contact. Also, instead of asking how I feel, I ask on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling today? So thank you, Daniel, for sharing that. I think that's really
Excellent.
great. Yeah.
Excellent idea.
Okay. All right. So it looks like there are no other comments. So Dr. Thomas, I would like to thank you again. Very good webinar. And I think, as you and I have discussed, it's probably the start of a series of conversations around mental health. And for the quality professionals, who are here on the call in construction, one thing to do as well is that, when you walk around the site, if you see someone doing someone good, recognize it there on the spot, and pinpoint it and recognize them for what they did. And that does a couple of things. One is, as Dr. Thomas alluded to, it's a very big morale booster, but it's also a way to encourage and recognize when things are done well. And I think that sometimes we spend a lot of time, I used to say we walk past, the 50 people doing it right and focus on the one person that's not doing it right, and we focus on that. But what about all the people that we just walk past? What have we done to recognize that good practice and to share that? So, Dr. Thomas, again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Much appreciated as well, because I know you're super busy as well. So thank you very much for taking the time out today to share with us the presentation.
Have a great day and a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, sir. You too. Take care, everyone.